And welcome again to Criminology, CRIM 4325. Profiling is the name of the class. Over the last couple of weeks, we have been discussing street gangs and gangs. We've talked about white gangs, white supremacy gangs. We've talked about the African American gangs. We've talked about the Hispanic gangs. We've talked about a few prison gangs. And now, so that nobody feels left out, we're going to talk about the Asian gangs. So let me share my screen with you, and we're going to start with talking about the Yakuza. There we go. Okay, so we're going to start about talking about the Yakuza and the Asian gangs. Again, what we've talked about up to this point has been mostly alliances and groups of gangs or ideas or alliances of gangs underneath a specific family-oriented alliance. And the Yakuza and the Asian gangs are no different. They have a lot of the same issues. The Yakuza's origin can be followed as far back to the 1612, when men known as the Kabuki Mono, translated into the crazy ones, became known by the local authorities. These were samurai who didn't have a master. They didn't have, they were, the military forces of Imperial Japan, and they were terminated, and they knew absolutely nothing else what to do except fight. So they became a group of mercenaries, and then eventually turned into a criminal organization. They have an odd clothing style, they have distinctive haircuts, bad behavior, simultaneously carrying a long sword. Historically, they carried a long sword that got everybody's attention. Today, they have all of these tattoos, which also gets their attention. Like the fact that, there's no tattoos above the collarbone, or where a long sleeve shirt or suit coat, there would be no place for the exposed tattoos to be seen by the outside world. Kind of like that idea. But anyway, the Kabuki Mono were, like I said, they were the beginning, or they were from the samurai knights. During a long periods of peace, they've been forced into unemployment. This is something that, we see with every military industrial complex. I was laid off from the military back in 1992. And so because the Congress and the government at the time in 1992 didn't think we needed as many soldiers, as many members of the military, they some wide sweeping cutbacks. And this is historical after World War II, after Vietnam, after World War I. And in Japan, it was after their wars. A lot of the samurai found themselves unemployed. They were known as masterless samurai. Several of them began to wander around Japan as a band of robbers, plundering in villages and small communities. We saw this the same with the we saw the same thing after World War II in the creation of the motorcycle gangs. And now the motorcycle gangs, the 1% gangs, are, just criminal elements altogether. Okay, so the current Yakuza didn't come about until the middle of the 17th century. Its members were known as the Bakudo, gamblers, there were street vendors. There are several categories of Yakuza have been added, a lot of different sects, a lot of different gangs, all falling underneath the umbrella of the Yakuza. Almost all of the Yakuza members have the same type of background. They're poor, they're criminals, they're misfits, they're not welcomed in society, and because they're outsiders, they're outcasts. They've been accepted into the family of Yakuza. They get help with problems. They get attention. That they get this feeling of security, of safety. They get tutoring. They get all of the things that they need in order to make sure that they become a productive member of Yakuza. Okay. The word Yakuza means 893. Ya is 8, Ku is 9, Za is 3. And it comes from Japan's version of blackjack, okay, or the Ochikabu. Generally, the difference between 21 or blackjack is that the Ochikabu, the objective number is 19 instead of 21. And as you see, the sum of 8, 9, and 3 is 20, which is without any worth. Okay, so the Yakuza, by their own definition, is worthless. Okay, and it's from their name, Yakuza, that they come from. They're without worth for society. They are the unwanted members of society. And then they are encouraged, they're embraced by the Yakuza themselves. The Yakuza has become influenced by the American gangster movies. They began to dress in black suits with white shirts, black sunglasses, cropped hair, and this primarily came after World War II. The Yakuza became tougher and more violent. The swords were history, and now they have Glocks and machine guns, and they've expanded their violence to ordinary everyday people, not just the shopkeepers and gamblers. They have moved into drugs and people smuggling and a lot of the same crimes that we've seen throughout the history of, or throughout our discussion on street gangs. The Yakuza do the same things. Between the years of 1958 and 63, the number of Yakuza members increased to over 184,000 members. Okay. Currently, they're running rough estimates, and these are just estimates, that there's some 90,000 members of the Yakuza with 5,200 different gangs throughout Japan. Okay, they began to mark out their territories with bloody wars. And then those wars came here to the United States. Okay, Kadima Yoshio, the picture of this guy, he is Japan's Al Capone, version of Al Capone. Okay, so there's no racial or ethnic requirement to become a member of the Yakuza, which is a little different from the Japanese culture itself. The Japanese culture itself is very elitist. Is that a good word? They don't trust outsiders very well at all. Where the Yakuza welcomes people from all over the world, but it looks out for misfits. They look out for those that really don't fit in. Yakuza members can be a youth that have been abandoned by their parents, refugees from Korea or China. There's a couple movies about that. American Yakuza. Their nearest boss becomes like their father, and their comrades and the people within their clique are known as their families. It's the Yakuza offers not just companionship, but money and status and authority. It's kind of like the secret societies that we hear about in the United States. The Yakuza kind of fits into that. You get a feeling of worth, even though Yakuza itself is without worth or useless or worthless. Those people that are inside the Yakuza feel this sense of security, this sense of belonging. But when you are a member of the Yakuza, there's strict obedience to the superiors and to the chain of command is explicitly required. Okay, there are two types of Yakuza. There's the freelance Yakuza and then the clan Yakuza. The freelance Yakuza is a Yakuza member that belongs to a little group of hustlers. They have some difficulty surviving because of the clan. They are not affiliated, they're unaffiliated Yakuza. They might be a group of them, but they're not associated with any larger clan. Clan Yakuza can tip the police about the crimes that these freelancers are doing. If you don't fall in with the clan, you know, the clan's going to target you. They're going to send the cops after you. They're going to put you out of business. The clan Yakuza have a certain use, can have a certain use of freelance Yakuza and hire them for hits and hire them to go do something that they don't want associated or affiliated with the clan itself. A freelance Yakuza member can also be used as a scapegoat if need be, someone to blame for a crime. If a freelancer is truly genius, he can begin his own clan. Once his little group of hustlers get large enough, he can start his own clan and get things put together. Okay, so the clan Yakuza, they belong to a clan. The clan can be compared to the Sicilian mafia family, okay, to the mob. The clan is structured as a common family in traditional Japan. The clan have hierarchical structures. The head chief is called the Oyabun, which means father in Japanese. Beneath him, we have his children, the Wakashu and the Koyodai. And this is not, they're not his real children. They're not real brothers. It's a rank within the clan Yakuza, and the clan Yakuza, because they are a group of misfits, they become family for each other. Okay, this is the organizational chart that I found on and for the Yakuza. You can review that. I guess you could hit pause. You can review the chart if you want to. The tattoos. Within Yakuza circles, to tattoo themselves, it's usual to tattoo themselves. It is the clan's badge. They have tattoos all over their body. The origin of why the Yakuza tattooed themselves comes from the Bakuto. They usually tattooed a black ring around the arm for each crime they committed, and it went up. Finally, it became evidence of strength. It could take over 100 hours for a back tattoo, and the tattoo was illustrated. This was to illustrate that you were unwilling to accommodate yourself to the societies of normal rules. You're not going to get comfortable. And it's how you illustrate your belonging to the clan or as property of the clan. The Ibizumi is when you cut off one of your fingers and send it to the leadership. This is done as an apology for disobedience, or it's done to expiate a wrongdoing. You can commit the Ibizumi as a way to restore honor, and this is cutting off your fingers at the digits. Within the last 10, 15 years or so, their organized criminal activities have grown to encompass almost every thriving area of business in Japan. Corporate extortion, gambling, loan sharks, narcotics, real estate, stock manipulation, manipulating the stock market, tourist scams, gun running, pornography. The mafia is the kingpin. The Yakuza is the kingpin in every illegal activity that happens in Japan. And they've moved and they've come to the United States, and they operate here as well. The youth terrorize the streets on motorcycles, what's more affectionately known in my circles as crotch rockets. You're not going to see these guys driving Harleys. They're going to be driving the Yamaha, the Honda, and the Suzuki crotch rockets. They collect protection from small businesses, and they demand respect. Okay, their sex-related enterprises within the Yakuza is a big revenue earner. They control and run the geisha girls and the houses within and around Japan. They cater to every whim of the country's overworked, buttoned-down salaried men. Truckloads of pornographic photography, literature, movies are smuggled into Japan from Europe and the United States. The mafia controls the prostitution rings throughout the country. And there is within Japan a national obsession with sex and sex with young uniformed schoolgirls that are going to move us back to our discussions on pedophilia and our discussions on the desire to have sex with young looking girls. And it's an international trade. The Yakuza source, primary source for these young looking girls are the Philippines, where impoverished parents will sell their daughters for about $5,000. And that $5,000 will feed the rest of the starving family for a year, at least a year. The Chinese one-child rule has also created a good market for the Yakuza because girls are not wanted. So the Yakuza can go get them and bring them to Japan, bring them to the United States, and to fill this pedophilia need that we find within and around the world. Okay, once they're in Japan or in the United States, the girls become comfort workers, dancing, plying for the customers in the sex bars and the brothels in places like Tokyo. The Kabuki-cho is one of the largest sex bars in Tokyo at the moment, and it brings the Yakuza a lot of money. Sex brings a lot of money to the Yakuza. Gun running is another Yakuza or mafia active area where the principal customers are the criminals themselves. The gangs specialize in the production and sale of illegal drugs, such as methamphetamines and amphetamines, cocaine. Some pictures of the sex workers. Okay, the Yakuza make millions of dollars a year through corporate extortion. The Sequoia or the shareholders meetings, they're masters at this enterprise. The Sokia will buy a small number of shares in a company so they can attend shareholder meetings, and then they will extort. They gather incriminating and damaging information about the leaders and the officers of the company. They bring them to the sex bars and they get information about their mistresses and the geisha girls. They find out about tax evasion and HIPAA violations and all of those, air pollution. And then they use it to blackmail these leaders of these CEOs, because honor is something that's extremely important within Japanese culture within itself, not just amongst the Yakuza. You don't want any of these negative influences or this negative information to be spilled out into the Japanese world. So you're willing to pay to keep it quiet. And you're born into it. I think this picture here is actually a doctored, photoshopped. I don't know anybody that would tattoo a dragon like that on their infant, but I found the picture interesting and cool. The Triad is another Asian gang. Prior to 1975, the Asian gangs were largely limited to the Chinese gangs were limited to disaffected Chinese youth living in the Chinatown of larger cities of the United States and Europe. Okay, these youth have been alienated from the greater community, the greater Chinese community. They were largely marginalized within the Chinese community itself due to a variety of social and economic conditions. Okay, prior to the departure of American forces in Vietnam in 1975, the stereotypical American concept of the Asian gangs derived largely from the image of the San Francisco Tongs. or the San Francisco Triads of an earlier era. Okay. Since this time, the image of Asian gangs has changed to include new immigrant members that's from Vietnam, the Vietnamese Chinese, the Laotians, Cambodian, the Hung people, which can now all be found in communities across the United States. Recent Southeast Asian immigrants have, wherever they've settled. There's a lot of triad gangs along the northern tier, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Montana, Wyoming, where you find these Southeast Asian immigrants, you're going to find the triad. Again, the triad is just another alliance of a whole bunch of gangs that are underneath them. The triads are enduring. They're secret societies. They were born of the political turmoil in China during the 1600s. Okay, so we here in the United States, we think that we are all big and bad because we have the gangs of New York. And the first street gangs emerged in the United States in the 1850s, 1830s to 1850s. These street gangs and these gangs in Asia date back to the 1600s, whether it's the Triad or the Yakuza or the Tongs. The Tong family associations were primarily legitimate organizations which formed in America during the 1800s to provide a social and financial support system to the Chinese immigrant population, because they were not, the Chinese population, immigrants were not accepted in the United States. They were nothing more than slaves when they got here, building the railroad. If not for the Asian population, the Chinese, specifically the Chinese population, I don't think the railroad would have been completed as quickly as it was. Okay, and that was the organizational chart for the triad. The triads are notorious extortionists, much like the Yakuza. They maintain a reputation in Chinatowns around the world. Like the Yakuza, they're famous for their street racing and their drifting, motorcycle racing. I don't know if you've seen the Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift. That's the Yakuza was in that movie, but the triad are the same. They follow the same rules and the same organization. It's critical to remember that the gang membership for school-age youth is usually limited to a small percentage of age-eligible youth, regardless of the prevailing social conditions. School-age youth membership into the triad, you have to finish school. Okay. Some highly isolated neighborhoods, in particular, gang membership may be high. It's estimated that less than 1% of the community and rarely more than 3% of the age-eligible Asian youth are in any given community are involved in gangs, because the gang membership brings disrespect and dishonor to the family. So if this is bringing dishonor to the family, you're not going to participate in this kind of activity. But gang-involved youth tend to be those who feel only marginally related to their family, marginally related to their community. They have no familiar ties. Some gang-involved youth however, do come from reasonably stable homes. They're good students, they're well-respected, and well-behaved. These youth often hide their gang membership from their parents. And despite the historical low levels of Asian youth's criminal involvement, recent trends in several American cities suggest dramatically rising arrest levels for some youth, primarily due to gang-related criminal activity. We are seeing an increase in criminal activity amongst the Asian population. Okay. The presence of diverse forces such as social, economic, racial sequestration, the context of misunderstanding and intolerance of other cultures supports the gang presence in the communities, because the Asian community, the Southeast Asian community, they self-segregate and because they self-segregate and they're afraid of assimilation, they're going to find the gang life becomes acceptable. So that is the Asian gang discussion that we're having today. And yeah, I hope to see you guys next week. We're going to start talking about terrorism. So I'm going to stop my recording now, and we're going to call it a meeting. Have a good day.